Blog Talk Radio.
All right, good afternoon. Well, not good afternoon. Good evening. Good night. This is late at night on the East Coast. I apologize, but it's um it's been a long day, and I plan to do this at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and I was too busy. So I figured rather than cancel the show, I just do it late. We'll see. We'll see how much we get done. We'll see how tired we are. I'm kind of exhausted. I don't know about you guys. But I'm kind of tired. I am in California. Yeah, Penny, you haven't been on live for a while, but I've been in California for a while. Not for long. One more day. Saturday, I go back to Puerto Rico. So next week's show starting on Sunday will be from Puerto Rico. Then I'm in New York. I might do a show from New York. We'll see. And then Puerto Rico, and then back to California, and then Puerto Rico, and then Colorado, and then Brazil, and then Puerto Rico, and then back to California, and then Puerto Rico, and then Europe, and then on and on and on it goes. The life of Yaron Brook. All right. I hope everybody's doing well. Hope you've been enjoying the shows. The last few shows seem to have done pretty well in the stat department. Got a lot of views, particularly the one with Ankagate and Greg Salamiri. I hope you enjoyed that. A recap of the Jordan Peterson conversation. So if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to check it out. It's really good. It's really good. If you like to talk, if you like epistemology, if you're interested in ideas, if you're interested in philosophy, it's hard to get better than Greg and Alka. I encourage you to go back and watch that show. I did that 2 days ago on Tuesday. So that's the show on Tuesday. It's both available as a podcast and as a video. A number of videos have come out the last few days. So I put up on my channel, you'll find my talk at Ocon. So how to be optimistic, why to be optimistic, what is optimism, how can one explain the world as we live in it today? So you can see that on my channel. That's available on video on my channel, and I think it's being put up in audio on the podcast as well. So you can get access to that very early, just last week, and you're already getting access to it now. So we're speeding up access to good content. And then today, a interview that I did at Ocon was published. An interview that I did with Patrick. David, who is a famous kind of, I guess, entrepreneurship kind of guru. He does a lot of videos online. He's got 770,000 subscribers online on YouTube. He does videos on entrepreneurship, and he interviewed me during Ocon. And it was good. I mean, he's not an objectivist. He doesn't know that much about objectivism. But so the interview, I think you'll find fun. He kind of pushed back. He was aggressive. He's got an aggressive personality. Me, I'm pretty laid back and quiet. No, I mean, I've got an aggressive, passionate personality. So the combination was actually quite good. So you can find that on his channel. I've linked to it on Facebook. I've linked to it on Twitter. You can find it. There's also a short segment that somebody did and put up about sex. And that's really the start of point that I want to talk about today. Because, and that's the short video that went up from this interview. And it really highlights an issue that seems to come up over and over and over again. And that's people's insistence in some sense, or I don't know what the right word is, but they do not get self-interest. They, in a sense, refuse to get what self-interest is. I mean, to some extent, Jordan Peterson has this. He has to claim, he has to go into this convoluted, I did a video on this, convoluted explanation of how there's no self, and how can there be a self-interest, and what does interest mean? And it just goes on and on and on. But at the end of the day, it's obvious that he is uncomfortable with the idea of self-interest or selfishness. And you saw that again from Patrick. Patrick, starts early in the conversation, goes something like, yeah, so being selfish is having sex with somebody and not caring about whether she has an orgasm or not. Now, that's bizarre. It's bizarre for anybody who has any experience with sex. Because what is the experience of sex? Is the experience of sex just the drive towards an orgasm? Is that the point of sex? And you might as well masturbate. You get an orgasm there too. Isn't the whole point of sex, or maybe in the future you can just use a sex robot? I mean, if the point is just orgasm, your own, then there are so many ways you can achieve that without bothering with another human being. So, but, we don't equate having sex with masturbation. We don't view the experience as the same. We strive and we make huge efforts and to have sex with another human being. Why? I mean, sex is incredibly intimate, personal. And it's why having sex with somebody you love is so much better than having sex with somebody you barely know. It's because of that intimacy. It's because of that visibility that you get from another person. It's because in some way in the sexual act, you get an expression of your own values reflected back at you. And in the pleasure, in the giving of pleasure to somebody else who you love, you get immense satisfaction about your own efficaciousness. Sex is an incredibly complex emotional, spiritual, physical activity that involves two people pleasuring each other. It's selfish not only because you're having an orgasm, it's selfish not only because you're having physical pleasure, but it's selfish because you're having a spiritual, emotional experience that is pleasurable. And part of that emotional, spiritual experience is the pleasure you are giving another person. And not just any other person, but a person you value really, really highly, a person that's incredibly important to you. Right? Again, that's why sex with somebody you love is, assuming everything else held constant, right? Assuming there's a sexual fitness, right? Is far greater than sex with a one-night stand with somebody, with a relative stranger. There it might be pleasurable physically. It might be slightly better than masturbation because you're getting some, assuming the person's nice and you've had a nice conversation and the person's not a horrible, evil human being. But, that you're getting some visibility from it. But sex with somebody you love is this complex, multidimensional experience that you're having. And it's a selfish experience because the purpose of it, the whole getting engaged in it is your own pleasure, but not just pleasure of your physical orgasm, the whole pleasure derived from this experience with somebody else. And part of that pleasure is the ability to give that person pleasure, right? So why is this so hard for people to get? I mean, to me, this is like obvious, right? It's obvious that sex is selfish. I'm doing it for me. And I think there are a number of issues going on. We have been conditioned to think about selfishness. We've been conditioned to think that selfishness is bad. And when we hear the word self-interest, we frame it, we couch it, we find a concrete example where it is bad. So yeah, it would be bad if you entered a sexual relationship with the sole purpose of a physical orgasm. And, doing that's bad. Self-interest is bad, goes in the same folder. That's the thing that comes into people's mind. Lying, cheating, stealing. That's the thing that comes into people's mind. So we've been trained to think of negative, stupid, ridiculous things as being self-interested. And I think it's a testament to the fact that people don't think deeply about these issues. They don't think deeply about their own life. They don't think deeply about ethics and about morality. That they they can't follow or they don't for themselves try to follow the example, try to figure out, is it really self-interested to lie, steal, cheat, and only be concerned with your own orgasm? So, so first it's this conditioning, right? We're conditioned to it by the altruism in our culture, by the altruism in our philosophy, by the altruism in our religion, by the altruism everywhere. So every interview I do, every talk I give, the assumption that people have is if you're going to be self-interested, you're going to screw other people. Not in the sexual sense, although maybe in the sexual sense too. Because that's the conditioning. Self-interest equals doing bad things to others. So that's just part of the culture. It's just out there. It's just the way people are trained to think about it. And then the second level is they don't think. They don't follow the example. They don't think a level deeper. They don't ask themselves the question, is this self-interested? Because why ask the question? We know self-interest is bad. We're done. That's it. Nothing else to talk about. We're finished. So there's no thinking going on. And this is the most troubling thing about the culture in which we live. And it's not unique to this culture, but I think we live in a particularly anti-intellectual culture where people are not thinking deeply about these kind of ideas. So they're not challenging themselves. And maybe the answer to that is, you can't expect them to be people just are like that. And very few people ultimately do deep thinking. I hope that's not true, because it's going to be very difficult for our ideas to win, or my ideas to win, if people don't think deeply. But then when they're challenged with it, it's interesting because some people go, okay. But then immediately their mind goes, okay, it works for sex. What about in business? What about lying and cheating and stealing? What about this other thing? So they're looking for concrete, and it's very hard for them to generalize. Again, they've been trained not to do this. They've been trained not to think about ethics, not to think about morality. Religion doesn't train you to think about morality. It trains you to do what you are told are virtues. So it says, don't think, just follow orders. Do what you're told. Here's what's right. Here's what's wrong. Do what's right. Avoid what's wrong. Otherwise, you go to hell. That's it. So not only are we taught the wrong ethics, but we are taught the wrong epistemology. We are taught that ethics is about following prescriptions, following orders. I mean, think about Ben Shapiro. I did a video on this. Think about Ben Shapiro, whose argument against self-interest is, well, there's a good-looking woman at the bar. Notice they always go to sex, which I think suggests their own issues. But there's a good-looking woman at the bar. If you're self-interested, you gotta have sex with her, because sex is the ultimate value. And he even ridicules the idea of stopping and thinking, is this in my long-term self-interest or isn't it in my long-term self-interest? But what he's really ridiculing is principles and thinking in principle. Because if you understand what sex means, if you understand the value of sex, right? And if you've got a principle about who you have sex and who you don't have sex, then the idea of going to sleep with a woman at the bar never crosses your mind, because you've got a principle. Just like lying doesn't cross your mind because you've got the principle of honesty. Not because it's a commandment, but because you understood that lying doesn't work, that lying is bad for you, that dishonesty is corrupting to your own epistemology, to your own ability to think, to your reason. And as a consequence, you don't lie. And you're not every single time you're faced with a situation where you could lie, or there might be some so-called benefit to lying. You don't think it through. You have a principle. You see, if you're religious, like Ben Shapiro, and like to some extent Peterson and others, they understand that you can't deal with concrete by concrete by concrete. So they're not pragmatists in that sense that they think you really do make a decision based on each concrete. But they can't have principles either, because where do principles come from? If you listen to the show with Greg Salieri and Ankar Gatia, one of Jordan Peterson's problems is he doesn't believe you can derive an art from a moral principle from reality. So he's stuck with, you got to have commandments. Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not. Even though Peterson is very good at explaining how lying is bad for you. And in that sense, the art, the lying, is derived from reality, from it is. It's bad for you. So Stuart, don't quote that. That quote is not from him. That quote is from Ayn Rand. That quote is from Ankar. That quote is being said by a million different people. By a million different people. Don't attribute it to the last person who happens to say it. And he doesn't deserve. That quote to be attributed to him. It's ridiculous. I mean, when I had Greg Salieri on here, so the quote is, what people call long-term self-interest is just self-interest. You exist in the long term. That quote, I said it, and Greg Salieri said it when he was on the show when we did the interview about self-interest. So don't attribute to some 25-year-old something Ayn Rand said. If you want to put the quote, say paraphrasing Ayn Rand. So the reason we say long-term self-interest is the same reason we say rational self-interest, the same reason I say sometimes rational long-term self-interest, to let people know there's such a thing, not to differentiate it from just self-interest. But if you insist on never giving people the context, then you lose people. Our job here is to educate, not to be dogmatic. Dogmatism, let's leave for the religionists. See, they can't, as I said, they can't think in principles when it comes to morality. So all they know are commandments. And if it's commandments, then you can't go sleep with that woman at the bar, although I suspect many do in spite of the commandments, because it's an absolute. Well, principles serve the same function. But, they can't think in terms of principles when it comes to morality. They can't think in terms of what self-interest really means. And this is this awful, awful, horrible training that we have got. We've got it from religion, we've got it from our philosophers, and we get it from popular culture. And I want to talk about popular culture in a minute, because I want to talk about the role of stories and why stories are so important. And in a sense, Peterson is right about the importance of stories and the importance even of mythology. He just doesn't understand what he's talking about. But it's incredibly, incredibly important. And partially is, if you get stories, one of the most powerful things, for example, in movies, when you go see a movie, that reinforces this idea, particularly with regard to sex, is that the bad guys in the movies are always portrayed as happier, more successful, getting the prettier girls, living a more, fulfilled life than the good guys. In almost every movie, the bad guy's fun. The bad guy projects self-esteem and happiness. The good guy is usually, he's a thinker, but thinker means that he's complicated, and that means that he doesn't have a good relationship with his wife or his girlfriend, or he doesn't get sex at all. The good guy is always a little dark and a little miserable and a little tired and a little sad and a little depressed. I mean, that's typical. And the bad guy's out partying, he's having fun, he's got self-esteem, he stands up straight, to use Peterson's analogy. The good guy's usually clunched over. There's a good movie portraying this, and that was Heat, years ago, Heat. and it had, I think it was the only movie where Al Pacino and Robert De Niro are both in the movie. I think it's the only movie, but that's true. And I can't remember who's who, right? I can't remember if De Niro's the cop or Pacino's the cop. But in that movie, it exactly portrays that. The other one is, it's a really good movie in that sense. The cop is miserable, pathetic. He's divorced. Everybody dislikes him. He's clearly depressed and not enjoying himself. And the bad guy, having a blast. The other one is, do you remember Face Off? Anybody remember Face Off with, Nicolas Cage and John Travolta? Nicolas Cage and John Travolta. Again, same thing. And you can go over and over and over again, and you can see this in movies over and over and over again. And it's this principle. And remember, that principle, to be good, is to not have fun, to not have sex, to not be happy. It's to follow your duty. And again, it's the same kind of moral code. If morality is commandments that go against human nature, because human nature is about raping and pillaging, then those who abide by human nature and go and rape and pillage are having fun, and those who don't are miserable Christians who are beating themselves up. And that's the morality that most people hold, and it's the morality that's reinforced over and over and over and over again in our movies, in our stories, in our novels. And, so people have a really hard time to understand what self-interest is. So you have to spend a lot of time explaining it to them. And if for a while you have to say long-term self-interest just so they can hold it somehow, then you do that. It's more important to educate than to be dogmatic. So, of course, there's no such thing as long-term self-interest separate from self-interest. Of course, there's only self-interest. Every objectivist knows that. The question is, how do you communicate? How do you educate? How do you teach? And how do you take people through the steps to get there? But so this confusion about what self-interest is, this superficiality, is driven by the morality of altruism. It's driven by the morality of Christianity. It's driven by the morality that has taught people over and over again that self-interest is bad. And it's driven by the fact that conventional morality teaches people not to think about morality, not to think about what's right and what's wrong, not to think deeply about how to live their lives. Follow orders, do your duty, sacrifice to others. Everybody knows what's right and what's wrong. Jordan Peterson, stand up straight. It's not complicated. Tidy your room. In the Bible, Kant, it's there. You know what's right or wrong. You just have to accept it. All right, let's see. We've got some super chat questions. Let's see which ones are on topic and which ones are not. Okay. Is it understandable that the founders were flawed in their morality considering the time in which they were alive? Do you think they could have seen beyond the concept of morality in 1700s, 1800s? I mean, I think it would have been very difficult. And again, I don't know that they were flawed in their morality. They were flawed in their theory of morality. I don't want to impute anything about their actions, although many of them supported, slavery, and many of them didn't free their slaves, even though they supported slavery. So some of it's understandable, some of it's not. Should they have understood the evil of slavery? Absolutely. Absolutely. They had all the data available to them. Should they have freed their slaves? Absolutely. Should they be criticized for not freeing their slaves? Absolutely. Should they be criticized for not being more adamant about the compromise around slavery and not insisting not to do it? Absolutely. But could they have come up with an alternative morality? No, I don't. I think it would have been expecting a lot, right? I think you have to have a millennial type genius like Ayn Rand was. I think you've had to had the information garnered from the Enlightenment plus the Industrial Revolution to get a full system of ethics, to see the full efficacy of reason. Again, I think they could have been better. I mean, Spinoza is starting to have a hint towards kind of some form of self-interest, right? But he is still, mystical in fundamental sense, even though he's maybe the first kind of, in modern times, first kind of atheistic philosopher. But so I think you needed a genius of the level of Ayn Rand, and they already did so much that to expect from them to now question Christian morality and everything that all the philosophers from Locke to all the philosophers of the time are preaching, from Locke to Hume to, Adam Smith, not a philosopher, but a thinker and writes about morality during this time, is to expect a lot. It's to expect a lot. Now, no, so I don't think it's surprising that the founding fathers had a conventional view of morality. I mean, look how many people today, post Ayn Rand, post everything Ayn Rand knew, post all the history that we've experienced for the last 250 years, are still holding on to Christian morality. And smart people, not dumb people, smart people, still holding on to altruism, still holding on to Kant and to Rousseau and to Augustin Comte, and not giving up on that. So with everything, and with Ayn Rand already around us, and look how difficult it is for us and for her ultimately to convince people of self-interest, to convince people that selfishness is a virtue. And she's been doing it for 50 to 70 years, right? 75 years to the fountainhead. Now, I think she's had an impact. I think the world's a better place because of her. I think lots of people are being impacted implicitly by her ideas. But in terms of an explicit philosophy, look how few people, given that it's already available now, have embraced it. So I can't blame the founding fathers on that count. Okay, Ian asks, since we are on the topic, what about gay or bisexual people in regard to masculine and feminine roles between two men or two women? I'm curious of the objectivist point of view on these relationships. So, I don't know. This is not exactly a fake question to ask. I'm not a psychologist. I don't see. I don't know. I mean, is the bottom line. I have no problem with these relationships. They obviously work for people. I don't doubt that they are love relationships. They are, healthy sexual relationships. Exactly how it works in terms of masculinity, femininity. In some couples, you can see that one party is more feminine, one party is more masculine. How that fits in terms of the biology, I just, the biology and the psychology and the psychological implications of that, I just don't know. I think you'd have to ask a psychologist that, somebody who's really thought deeply about the issues of femininity, masculinity, and then how those relate to gay relationships. So I have no problem with gay relationships, and I have no doubt of their efficacy, if you will, and their passion and love and success. But I don't have a psychological explanation. I can barely, it's hard enough to understand how it all works with a man and woman. I think it's just harder for somebody who hasn't experienced it to understand it in outside the context. Is it okay for private prison owners? This is a completely different topic, but fine. Is it okay? But he's contributing $20, so I have to be nice. Is it okay for private prison owners to pursue their self-interest on profiting from capturing and keeping criminals in their prisons? Would they be self-interested in rehabilitating criminals to lower recidivism rates? So let me be clear. I'm not an advocate for private prisons. I don't think, and partially because of these weird incentives that it creates, I don't think prisons should be privatized. I don't think police should be privatized. I don't think the function of courts should be privatized. I think ultimately you need an objective arbitrator. And I think here too, it's not clear to me that the incentive structure is right, whether it can be right, partially because in a sense they have this perverse interest of keeping them in prison as long as they can, and keeping them coming back because that's generated profit. Now, you could imagine private prisons that are competing with one another, and competing with one another for what? So the competition is around what? Who is paying for it? The state is paying for it. So it's the state that gets to decide. Yeah, the whole concept of private prisons, I think, is wrong. It is the government's responsibility as part of its law enforcement function to enact justice by putting some people behind bars and then determining the level of risk that they pose in releasing them. And yeah, so I think one has to change the incentive structure around this. So the profit motive is not there. It's a governmental function. That's the best I can do. All right. Oh man, tons of questions. Okay. Women in infantry. I've said this before on another show. I don't generally believe that women should be in combat. The Israeli army does not have women in combat. The American army now didn't have in the past. I just think that women in combat place the men in combat around them at risk. And because I think men are protective of women. And I think you can override that, but it's hard. And why place barriers when it's life or death? Why not just accept that? Now, if you can show me that that is not natural, that's not an inclination that you're going to have, that then fine. Then I have no problem with women in combat. But to the extent that it is distracting, to the extent that it causes men to be overly protective in an emergency situation, I think it's bad. I think it's, but if you're an exceptional woman, then so be it. But I just don't see the need for it. So, I mean, the military can function fine with an all-male infantry, with an all-male combat units, and a variety of reasons why I think, I don't like the idea of having women in combat. All right, Yaron, you support Silicon Valley despite leftist views, as do I. However, would you still have the same affection if they were alt-right? Well, yes, but they couldn't be alt-right. They couldn't be alt-right. I mean, how much do we want to go into this? But if you know people in Silicon Valley, if you've met people in Silicon Valley, they have leftist political views. But when it comes to the fundamental epistemological view of the world, and even the ethics, when it comes to the way they live their lives on a day-to-day basis, their focus is on reality and as reason. They couldn't be as productive as they are. They could not be as productive as they are unless there was some individualism there, unless there was a vast extent, a large amount of respect for reason, for individual human reason. And the fact is that the kind of left that is represented in Silicon Valley, which is not the same left that is the nihilists rampaging through Berkeley and other places. The kind of left in Silicon Valley, the kind of people who are productive, innovative, thinking, engaged, scientific, probing, trying to advance, be productive and create values and advance humanity, that they have some virtues there. And those virtues are individualism. Now, I don't believe that's possible of a alt-right mentality, because I think that the feature of alt-right, more than anything else, is tribalism and collectivism. And that's why I don't think there are many alt-right, and I'm open to you presenting examples, many alt-right people who are super productive, who are innovative, who are in the sciences or in the STEM. Most alt-right people are not in STEM. Now, if what you mean by alt-right, you mean kind of the racist, nationalist types, right? That self-identify as alt-right. I just don't think that they have such a disregard for reason. And as a consequence, they're not productive, they're not creative, they're not innovative, they're not running successful, prosperous companies. And if they were, I would say, well, there must be something positive there. I'd have to rethink what the alt-right means. But as long as I don't have those examples, as long as all the people that I know who are alt-right are all losers, and almost none of them, as far as I know, come from the STEM, almost none of them are actually successful. And the ones who play around with being kind of alt-right, I don't know, Peter Thiel, who's not alt-right at all. He's much more libertarian than that. I think strategically sometimes adopt alt-right because they think it'll advance their goals. I think it's mistaken. I think it's bad. I think it's horrible. But I don't think they truly are alt-right. If you know Peter Thiel, he's an independent thinker. I agree or disagree with him, and I disagree with him a lot. He thinks for himself, and he's fundamentally an individualist. He's not what the alt-right is, with tribalist and collectivist and mindless. So yeah, if they were, but they're not, and I would argue they cannot be, because the essence of the alt-right is mindlessness. It is tribalism and collectivism. And the left, as manifest in Silicon Valley, the left of what's his name, the guy who runs Apple, and Johnny Ives and Steve Jobs, and the left of I don't know, the guys who run the software that runs everything that we think of as the internet. All those guys, they're not the kind of nihilistic leftists. They're the kind of productive leftists. And I would relate it to this. You've got CEOs on the right, call it the so-called right, who are religious, who have a lot of bad ideas, but who are incredibly productive. And I have a huge amount of respect for them, in spite of the fact that they're all Christian. And I hate Christianity. But I have a huge amount of respect for them. And the people on the left who they're not the people, and the people on the Christians don't want to create a theocracy, explicitly don't want to create a theocracy. If they were explicit theocrats, then I don't think they could be as successful as the CEOs. And the people on the left, in spite of all their flaws and problems, they're not nihilists. And some of them can be incredibly productive and incredibly rational and incredibly focused on reality and incredibly use their reason. So I respect them. I respect people on the left and on the right for their productive ability. But the alt-right is the equivalent of the nihilists on the left. And a nihilist and an alt-right cannot produce. They cannot run a Silicon Valley company. They cannot be successful. They are losers. Everything about them is a loser mentality. So I hope I answered your question, but I think you're trying to suggest that I have a bias against the alt-right and I'm much more sympathetic to the left. No, if you take the equivalent of the alt-right being nihilism or communism, then I hate them both. And you can't be successful. I don't know anybody who runs a company who's a communist. So what's his name? The guy from Tesla, Elon Musk, who is not running necessarily very successful companies and cannot run them without government subsidies. And I do not like him. But even he is not a communist. He says some stuff about socialism. Basically, he wants to be Sweden. Sweden's not that socialist. if that's socialism, then that's a pretty weak enemy. That's, it's pathetic, because in some ways they're more capitalist than we are. They regulate their businesses less. So, but if he was a communist, then he couldn't be running even a semblance of a successful company. I don't know any communists who are successful business people. I don't know any nihilists who are successful business people. And I don't know anybody on the alt-right who is a successful, productive business person. All right. Rand is often accused of being against kindness. Could she have done a better job in explaining the difference between kindness and altruism? I don't know what it means to say that Ayn Rand could have done a better job explaining anything. I mean, Ayn Rand was a genius. She explained so much. She did so much. You want to quibble about a minor issue? Anybody who's honest, anybody who reads Ayn Rand, not just one novel, but actually reads Ayn Rand and is confused about kindness versus altruism, is not thinking. Think about the scene in Atlas Shrugged. Talk about stories. Think about the scene in Atlas Shrugged, where Dagny Taggart meets the bum on the train who is basically getting a ride for free. And if you know Dagny Taggart and you know Ayn Rand and you know objectivism, you know that what she does next is throwing off the train while it's moving, right? That would be the, quote, selfish thing to do. But what does she actually do? What does Dagny actually do? She sits him down, buys him a meal, asks him questions, because she's curious. She's going to get a value out of this. But her assumption is not, this is an evil man, I must treat him horribly. No, she's kind. And all the heroes are kind, in a sense, kind in a sense that they don't treat human beings like trash. They treat human beings decently, unless the human being is trash. And then they don't deserve the kindness. So the kind of kindness, if kindness means doing what Reardon does with his family, that's not kindness, that's altruism, that's sacrifice. So kindness is not an important virtue for Ayn Rand. But if you read her novels, you can see her heroes being kind. Think about Dagny's relationship to James Taggart's wife. I forget her name. And how kind she is. But because this is an innocent person, basically a good person, and she gives her the benefit of the doubt. But you're not going to be kind to an evil person. You're not going to be kind to a monster. You're not going to be kind to somebody who's acting against your values. So kindness is not a primary virtue. And I don't think Ayn Rand needed to spend more time on kindness, because I don't think, if you really read her books, if you think about them, if you're open-minded, if you're trying to integrate what is she actually trying to say, I don't think you confuse kindness with altruism. Now, I know that people do. I know objectivists who do. I know objectivists who believe you don't go to take care of your crying baby when it cries because, hey, you're sleeping, leave me alone. You don't open door to strangers. You're not polite. Politeness, oh, what's that? So, yeah, I know objectivists who are not kind. Even, to nice people, never mind to strangers. But they didn't get that from Ayn Rand. They're just, they're basically not conceptualizing selfishness right, and they're not thinking, and they're not integrating. And they don't value. I mean, if you value life, then you value human life, then you value other people, unless you know something negative about them. Now, you don't value them enough to risk your life for them, maybe, but you value them enough to open the door for them. I mean, really. So, yeah, so I don't think it's a problem with Ayn Rand. I think it's a problem with the readers. And I think that anybody who's thinking, that anybody, somebody says I come across as angry. Well, I don't know. I'm passionate. I'm not angry. But I guess some people do think I come across as angry. What can I do? I'm curious how many of you think I come across as angry? Is it just WP or is it others? All right, Unshelled has a question. Is the profit motive evil in private prisons? Well, I think the existence of private prisons shouldn't exist. Once they exist, no, I don't think the profit motive is evil. But what are you profiting off of? I just don't think, I don't think it's right. I don't think you're profiting off of productive activity. You're not profiting off of creating values. And it's not the role of markets. This is force. Therefore, it's the role of government. I come across as frustrated. Okay, angry and frustrated. I'll have to pick some happy topics, right? Sex is a happy topic. Sex is fun. Sex is good. Sometimes I come across as frustrated because I'm frustrated by how few people understand objectivism, how few people get Ayn Rand, and how few people are listening. And sometimes I'm angry. Yeah, sometimes I'm angry. But most of this is just passion. It's just I care. I love this stuff. I'm trying to, I'm excitable. And some people view excitable as angry or passionate. But I'm not. I am, yeah, if you want to ask a question, super chat. Okay, here's one more. How do you objectively evaluate someone's character? Oh my God. Like these are supposed to be easy, quick questions that I can answer on the fly while I get back to the topic I wanted to discuss, but I'm not going to be able to get to my topic. We're going to talk about stories another time because we're running out of time here. All right, I'll say something about this. But this is a big topic. I do suggest listening to Leonard Peikoff's lectures on judging people morally without being moralistic. I'm pretty sure it's up on campus. If it's not on campus, then it's in the e-store. And if it's not on campus now, it will be on campus soon, but it's a must listen. It really goes in detail into this question. But how do you objectively evaluate someone's character? Well, I mean, you have to have some experience with them. You have to know what they're saying. So the example here is one of my professors was a total witch doctor, but we seem to connect on a personal level. Well, but what do you value? And you value his character. So is he honest? Does he have integrity? You evaluate it based on whether they live up to what objectively are virtues and values in reality. Is he somebody that had a purpose? Just because they were nice doesn't mean he has good character. Good character is not about kindness. This is why kindness is not a significant virtue. So you can have somebody who's kind. You can respect somebody who's being smart. You can respect somebody. Some of these professors can be honest, or at least honest in certain compartments of their life, even if they're not honest on some of the intellectual work that they actually work on. To make a moral evaluation of somebody, you have to know quite a bit about them. You have to know, again, depending on the context. I mean, if you're over 25 and you're a Marxist, if you're a communist, then you're a bad person. You're evil. You're an evader. You cannot not evade what communism represents after a certain age with a certain level of education. But if I don't know what you're saying, he's a total witch doctor. Why do you connect on a personal level if he's a total witch doctor, right? I can connect with people on a personal level who are religious because yes, they're religious, but they don't take their religion really that seriously. Once in a while, they say something about Jesus or the Old Testament or something. But generally, they are rational. They live their life with purpose. They're productive. So again, it goes back to what extent is their irrationality, the witch doctor part of them, affecting their moral character? And it has to affect it somewhat, but to what extent? And if you're connecting personally, then there must be some shared values. There must be something that you're respecting. Yeah, the course is actually called, or the lecture is actually called Judging, Feeling, and Not Being Moralistic by Leonard Peikoff. Highly recommended. So you have to look at what is it that's coming that is positive about this person. What is it that's negative about this person? Where does the negative part manifest itself? Where does the positive part manifest itself? And objectively evaluate those two to be able to make a moral evaluation. And most people are mixed, and you have to be able to evaluate people as mixed. But most people have a good side to them. Otherwise, they die. If people were consistent altruists, they would die, or they join the Nazi party, right? They'd either die or kill. Most people are productive. Most people, are honest. Most people live their life with based on rationality, at least to some extent, and they compartmentalize their world. Right? And you have to judge them accordingly. You judge them as mixed, but some people tilt more positively and some people tilt more negatively. So I don't know if I answered the question, and since you gave $25, let me know. I mean, I'll let me know if I answered the question. If I didn't, I can certainly do a show in the future that gets into that. But again, I recommend listening to Leonard Peikoff. Okay, I think this will be the last question. Shakespeare had a great quote about being nice but evil. One may smile and still be a villain. Yeah, absolutely. So kindness does not mean goodness. This is, again, why I don't think kindness is an important virtue, and it can certainly be a tool in the, think about, I wonder if one may smile and still be a villain is from Othello. I don't know how many of you know Othello, but if you want to understand evil, then read Othello. Othello probably has the portrayal of the purest of evil. It's like a chewy, condensed. Iago is the villain in Othello, and Iago is so it's from Hamlet, not from Othello, but yeah, that's right. So I think he's talking about his stepfather who killed his father. Or maybe his mother. But if you want to understand evil and the essence of evil, which is evasion, envy, hatred of the good for being the good, then you got to read Othello. It's such a brilliant play. And Shakespeare, look, one of the things that's stunning about Shakespeare is the level to which he understands human evil. The level to which he understands human evil in all its different forms. From, in a sense, the indecisiveness of Hamlet, from the inability to act, the intellectual who thinks but cannot act, cannot do anything, the impotence of Hamlet, to the sheer evil of Iago, right? To the innocent and yet evasion of Othello himself, who chooses to believe Iago over his own knowledge of his own wife. So Shakespeare is brilliant. I mean, he's one of the great geniuses of all time. His understanding of human psychology, particularly, as I said, of the psychology of evil, but also the psychology of the impotent. And you've got Othello, who is at the end impotent. You've got Hamlet, who is impotent. You've got these impotent, and that the problem with Shakespeare, of course, is you've got impotent characters and evil characters. and there's nobody good. So there's no goodness. There's no real virtue in Shakespeare. And I don't think he can comprehend what virtue is. Again, think about it. He's writing in a Christian era, in an era dominated by Christianity and Christian morality. And goodness is impossible. To be good is to be Jesus. It's to be on a cross. It's to die a horrible death. There is no goodness in the world. And if you read Shakespeare's dramas, there are no good characters. There's no goodness. Maybe some of the minor characters or commenting on stuff. But so, and this is true of Christianity. This is true, for example, of Martin Luther and Calvin. If you read Martin Luther and Calvin, they tell you, on this world, in this grubby, horrible, materialistic, evil, bodily world, they cannot be good. Everything is evil. And in order to make heaven possible, they believe in determinism. They believe in predestination. You're basically born going to heaven or going to hell. It's written. It's all done. So nothing matters. All right. So Daniel, again, people put their money where their mouth is. It makes it very difficult for me to say no, right? He's putting $50 in for a question. Now that's commitment. So my thought on Shakespeare, I think it's an important thought, but it's an importance about altruism and about Christianity. Since altruism is impossible, it's impossible to live for other people. You die. I mean, Mother Teresa comes as close as you can imagine. And I mean, consistent altruism. She lives a horrible, miserable, pathetic life. Nobody wants that, so nobody does it. So nobody's good. So it's not surprising that Shakespeare cannot comprehend a good person. His frame of morality is Christianity, therefore there cannot be goodness. They cannot be good. Goodness is in another dimension. Goodness is in heaven. There is only good in another world. In this world, there's no good. All right. Daniel asks for $50. See if you can top that, guys. Do you think that intellectuals who misrepresent objectivism don't understand it? Or perhaps does it offer truths they can never accept? I think it's both. And so let's take Jordan Peterson, who just read Atlas Shrugged. I don't think Jordan Peterson can understand Atlas Shrugged. He just cannot understand it because it is so foreign to the way he thinks about the world. Now, he could stop and say to himself, this is a challenge to everything I believe. Let me rethink everything I believe. But almost nobody does that. Or at least nobody does that over a certain age. It's very unusual for an intellectual over a certain age to have the ability to do that. So take Jordan Peterson's criticism of Atlas Shrugged. He says the characters have no conflict. Therefore, they're two-dimensional. They're not challenged. Now, if you read Atlas Shrugged and you know the character Reardon, you know how challenged he is and how conflicted he is about lots of different things, from sex to his work, to his family, to ultimately Dagny and whether to join the strike. Massive conflict and deep psychological analysis, in my view, that Ayn Rand engages in concretizing the conflict and the choices he has to make. And remember the speech he gives Dagny about sex is horrible, after they've had sex, and she just laughs at him. He's really confused. But you see, for Jordan Peterson, that is not a real conflict. For Peterson, as an intellectual, and just taking him as an example, a conflict is the devil versus a saint, God, right? good versus evil inside your head. One saying, murder this person. The other one said, oh, no, don't murder. One driving you towards committing evil, and the other holding you back in the name of, morality. So to him, that's conflict. To him, that's what psychology is about. It's Freudian kind of. You've got the id and the ill, or whatever it is, right? It's the two things inside your head. So, and that's Dostoevsky. That's why he loves Dostoevsky, because Dostoevsky projects a human psychology which is consistent with Jordan Peterson's view of mankind. Ayn Rand projects a human psychology which is very different. She's presenting us a reader who's not conflicted between a monster sitting in his shoulder, but between conventional ideas of morality that lead him towards altruism, lead him to not get it, to be mistaken, to be confused, to be wrong, and his constant effort to try to answer the question, to try to figure it out, to try to figure out what to do in life and how to be good, how to act justly, how to act right. It's not the same conception of human psychology. Now, again, Jordan Peterson could stop and say, ooh, let me really think about this, but I don't think he can. So in that sense, it's a truth he can never accept. But it's a truth he can never accept, and therefore never really tries to understand it, and therefore doesn't understand it. Right? So now that's Peterson. I think some intellectuals, I think a lot of intellectuals face that problem. They read her and they've got a, let's say, Platonic view of how knowledge is imprinted on our brain. And it's kind of a revelation kind of model, or they're religious, or they are, empiricists, and they don't believe in abstractions, and they don't believe in integration, and they don't believe in principles. They're some form of pragmatists. And what she's doing is really challenging everything they believe. And to really understand her, they would have to be able to put aside their ideas and really think objectively about the world without prejudice. And after a certain age, I believe that's very hard for people to do. It's very hard for people to really think deeply. And I think an intellectual confronting Ayn Rand needs to think deeply about these questions. And therefore, it's a combination of they misrepresent, they don't understand it because they can't accept it. Right? It's not that it's hard, because many of us understood it, at least at some level, when we were very young and with very little experience. So it's not that they're not smart enough. It's that it goes against everything they thought. It goes against their integration. To really accept this, they would have to dismantle so much. And Pam says it's terrifying to them. Absolutely. That's right. Emotionally, it's scary, because it means everything they've done is wrong. Everything they believed is wrong. Everything they've taught is wrong. Everything they've advocated is wrong. I mean, in a deep sense, everything they've taught is wrong. In a deep sense, everything Peterson says is wrong. Right? And that's scary. So some of it's fear. A lot of it's just evasion. Don't go there. Some of it's laziness, because it would require real effort to understand Ayn Rand, given where they're coming from. So I think you can combine all of those two: fear, fear and laziness and evasion, discomfort, which is part of the fear. And they're not all rationalists. Some of them are rationalists, some of them are emotionalists. I mean, there are all kinds of people who misrepresent Ayn Rand. But at the end of the day, they can't afford to accept her ideas, and therefore they can't understand them. Yeah. If you understand how the human mind works, and that we are an integrating machine and everything is connected to everything, that when they encounter something that is totally new to them or different, and they start integrating it because their mind does it, because they're intellectuals and that's what you do, and they suddenly realize where it's heading, or they realize how much untangling and new integrations they're going to have to make, that again, the laziness, the fear, and or the evasion kick in, and they stop. And if you're an intellectual, particularly if you're a decent intellectual, that is somebody who's really thought about what he's doing and really invested a lot and written and read and thought and taught and engaged, then there's a lot of integrations there. There's a lot of connections. Your knowledge is all connected. And new knowledge, new, radically different knowledge, the consequence of that and how it would untangle. And some of them are honest, they want. And so, some of them, remember, there's a I mean, they're busy. So take Peterson again. Some of it is he's busy, right? So he heard some interesting thing from Greg Selimary when we had a discussion with him, and he might have said, that's kind of interesting. I should follow up on that. And then what probably happens is he's doing 500 other debates and discussions and presentations, he's writing a new book or whatever he's doing, and he never gets back to it, and he never follows up on it. Now, does that mean he evaded? No. Does that mean he's a bad person? No. He heard something interesting, and he didn't follow up. It could be laziness. It could be evasion. It could be that life got in the way because he's a busy guy, and that's a virtue that he's a busy guy. All right. So I think, as I said, I think it's a lot of different things. I mean, Upton says here something I think it's important. I don't think it's related to this question because I don't think that's what the question is, but I don't like how quickly some objectivists jump to calling people nihilists or anti-mind or the shorthand. It is very rarely true. I agree with you, Upton, completely agree with you. And this is why I admire people in Silicon Valley in spite of the fact that they're leftists. They're not anti-mind and they're not nihilists and they're leftists. So is most of the people on the planet. Doesn't make most of the people on the planet the enemy. So, and the same with people who are religious. You don't just write them off just because they're religious. They might have some good attributes, very positive attributes. Just because you're religious doesn't mean you're anti-mind. So we're too quick to dismiss. And you have to look at, moral judgment is hard. And evaluating people is not easy. And you can't jump from politics to other stuff. Politics is, I mean, really, politics is not what defines you philosophically. Politics is not what defines you philosophically. I mean, all the people out there who all they care about is your politics, you're Democrat or Republican, you're left or right. You're just like the Marxists. You're just like the leftists. The leftists believe everything is politics. I heard on NPR yesterday a show about Shakespeare. And they were talking about Shakespeare, about a production of Shakespeare at the Ashford, Oregon Shakespeare Festival, which I've been to a number of times, loved it. And the author was saying all art is political. The essence of art is politics. And that's just completely and utter false. Ayn Rand's definition of art has to do with metaphysical value judgments. Life is not all about politics. People can be leftists and good people. People can be rightists and bad people or good people. It's your metaphysical value judgments. It's your sense of life. It's the way you live your life. It's your ethics. And this is why I love Silicon Valley, because there they live their life based on the based on the principle of productiveness and reason and value creation and hard work and making stuff of value and the trader principle. All right. I am done. I'm tired. I'm not angry, not even frustrated. I enjoy these shows, so hopefully you do too. I think some of you do. Obviously, you're showing it by contributing, and I really, really, really appreciate that. It tells me that you're getting value out of the show, and more than anything, the Patreon contributions that you provide are a signal to me that I am creating something of value to you. And the more people contribute, it's less about the amount, almost more about the number of people. The more I know I'm creating value to more people, because I know that if somebody gives $2 and they're a student, that might be the equivalent of $1,000 to somebody else in terms of the value that they are getting from what I'm doing. So to me, it's the number, right? So I'm eager to get to 1,000, to 10,000, to 100,000, ultimately people who believe they're getting enough value from the show that they can give $1 a week, $1 a month, $2 a month, or do it through super chat, a few dollars here or there, or $50 like Daniel did, which is really impressive. So thank you for all those who support and contribute to the show via Patreon or via PayPal or via super chat. 3 different ways to contribute to the show. You can go to paypal.me, Yaron Brook Show, and just make a contribution. You can go to Patreon and make kind of a monthly contribution, or you can just wait and ask a question, or just contribute on Patreon, on Super Chat on YouTube. Either way, the money does reach me, and more importantly, the message reaches me that I'm creating something of value for you, keeps me motivated, and prevents me from being angry and frustrated. So I am going to, I'm going to spend some time with my wife. I will talk to you all on Sunday. We've got an interview on Sunday. Who am I interviewing on Sunday? Let me tell you who I'm interviewing on Sunday so that you guys know. All right, Sunday I'm interviewing Jason Hill. Jason Hill is a professor of philosophy at... all right, I'll let you know on Sunday because I forgot the name, but in Chicago. He has written in commentary, and I think in the Wall Street Journal, a number of really interesting articles about race in America. He is originally from Jamaica. He is gay. He is a huge Ayn Rand fan. I'm not sure he'd call himself an objectivist. We'll have to ask him that. But a huge Ayn Rand fan, a really sweet guy, really nice guy. There's a lot. I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion, and I'm looking forward to it because I'm going to pull up his articles and commentary, and I am going to push a little bit on some of the things that he thinks, and I want him to tell you his story because his story is really amazing. I mean, he says that Ayn Rand saved his life, and he doesn't just mean it like intellectually like we do. Literally saved his life. So Jason Hill on Sunday, tune in. It's going to be terrific. He's one of these intellectuals you should get to know, one of these people who are doing intellectual work, related to objectivism, whether it's within objectivism, interpreting objectivism, but in the sphere of objectivism that is interesting and different. And and Pamela, you're not going to miss it because it's going to be in YouTube forever and it's going to be in a podcast forever. And you can always listen to it separately. He's got a new book out, Greg Solimiri, who's on Facebook, tells me, on minorities succeeding in the US, which is a lot of what he writes about. He writes about stop with blaming everything on racism. I'm Black, I'm in a minority, and America is the greatest place to be and the greatest place to succeed. So I'm curious about talking to him about the book. I'll have to look up the book. And I think it's going to be a good conversation. I think you'll enjoy it. So tune in live or, tune in later and listen later. So Pamela, you don't get off for not, you still have to listen. It's your duty. It's one of the Yaron commandments. All right. I will talk to you all on Sunday. By then I'll be in Puerto Rico. Cool. Talk to you then. Bye, everybody.